Let's talk about how to alleviate debt in your business or personal life so that you can live with better confidence and less fear. It's important to understand that when you get into debt, fear is a factor, and we'll talk about that in detail. I'm Justin Hitt from Sustainable Wealth Secrets. In order to convert income into wealth, the money you earn, either actively or passively, has to go into investments that cash flow, assets that cash flow. You have to have growth. The most detrimental thing to growth is debt. Now, throughout my life, there have been times where I've been in tremendous amounts of debt, $250,000, $264,000, even $400,000 or $500,000 in debt. That debt matters most in how it is being applied inside of some kind of structure. So if that was $400,000 in consumer debt, that's bad, because if you have that much capital need and you're using it for legitimate business purposes, then you can get much better rates than consumer debt. So I have a program called the Debt Management Plan. It focuses specifically on how to manage debt for leverage in an organization. I want to talk specifically about how you can understand the environment we're in right now so that you can eliminate debt, so that you can get better access and utility value out of debt, and ultimately relieve some of that anxiety folks have when they owe other people money. First off, organization. What is that? Well, that could be your family unit, that could be a business, or that could be your position inside of some other group. When I say organization, is because I believe that the borrowing of money should only be done in the context of being able to pay it back. Now, there will be external circumstances like COVID. There could be a bad economy, heavy inflation. There could be other factors that, you lose a job that cause you not to be able to pay that back. Whether you can pay the money back or not, you will have the frustration and the concern because you're working for somebody else. You're earning money. And by the way, I'm going to give you anxiety if you don't already have it. If you're earning money and a large percentage of that money has to be paid over to somebody else, then you're not getting to benefit from your labor. Whole political systems are built on this. If you're working for the man and when you get home, your net check is significantly smaller than what you started with, there will be some frustration, there'll be some concern, and folks will leverage that over you and often use it to sell you other products and services. A consumer that's in debt is the new slave. The consumer who is in debt is dependent on that credit to get results. One of the things that's going to happen today, oh, by the way, those results are not usually anything other than entertainment. My suggestion, if you want sustainable wealth, is that we don't buy entertainment. We create entertainment for ourselves, and we create it through our interactions and social engagements and stuff like that, rather than going out and purchasing it. Now, you're still going to spend money, but if you're out to having dinner with clients and it produces a new business opportunity, the client is paying for your dinner. The larger point is, the anxiety, frustration, and concern of being in debt is legitimate, and it is actually being used against you in both the attention economy and consumerism in general. When you fear the debt collector, when you fear what might happen if you should lose your job, you're going to stay in the system. Now, a lot of my content is not popular because I'm showing you how to get out of the system. Wealthy people are not in the same system you are. When they go to the bank, they get money at lower rates. When they have a business, they can roll over cash, so they can float money. For example, payroll. Companies don't have all that payroll money sitting around all the time in liquid net cash flow. They have to borrow the money out to pay the payroll, and then they pay it off before the end of the month because they have receivables. They have other cash flow in general. If you want to develop wealth, it starts by reducing your debt, or at least converting the debt liability into an asset that cash flows. So, $400,000 in debt. If that is all consumer debt, very, very, very bad, because that amount of money should get you in a position to get debt that is at lower rates, non-consumer debt. Credit cards are at the highest rates possible because they are convenience money. If you're buying a house, for example, you might have $400,000 in debt built into a house that has an asset value higher than $400,000. Now, that's not always the case because they used to do these ninja loans and they used to do 100% financing. You want to probably be at 50% to 65% loan to value. That means the size of your loan is significantly smaller than the value of your home, not so you have equity to take out. Again, that fear, that frustration, some marketer is going to come along and say, well, you need some money. Let's tap into your house. That's not a good idea. If you need money, get more customers. If you need money, deliver marketable value. And again, that debt structure, getting out of debt isn't always necessary. If you've got a $400,000 loan at 3.2% interest and a current loan rates are 7% for mortgages, then you can carry that debt as long as you want. Your focus should now be cash flow. Do you have the cash flow available? Do you have the emergency funds and reserves to continue to pay on your house? You need shelter anyway. There are situations where you may have a low percentage loan, but the value of your house is so high and the utility of your house is no longer there. So for example, as individuals age and the children have left home, these 3,000, 4,000, even 10,000 square foot houses that folks have gotten themselves into in good economic times can often be sold along to someone else, and now you can get an apartment, you can get a smaller home that's easier to manage, and you're actually going to be in a much better situation. So we don't always want to look at the anxiety as far as removing debt, because that may not be the anxiety. It could be the realization that the debt you have is the wrong kind of debt. It's bad debt. It's debt that takes away from your earnings rather than contributing to your earnings. In the case of someone who has got a good portfolio of debt or a business with a good portfolio of debt, we have to be mindful of insurance and banking challenges. Right now in 2023, inflation is going crazy. Now, the government is saying there's no inflation. Economic reports saying there's no inflation. But when you go to the store and you buy food, you realize the dollars you have in your pocket buy less food. If you're on a fixed income, you know that the dollars you have don't get as much fuel in the vehicle. You're somewhat limited to what you can do because, again, there isn't an expansion of income. There is an expansion of costs. And this expansion of costs is really hurting folks right now. Another factor is that banks have reduced the amount of money they're willing to lend, and interest rates have gone up. So as a business, if you're having to use a line of credit to pay your payroll because the money comes in over the month rather than all at once, which payroll is pretty much all at once, then what's going to happen is you're going to lose the ability to pay your employees, which is going to help you lose employees. That's a big problem. Or it'll cost you more each month, and so you're now reducing your free net cash flow. So let's talk about solutions. The only way to pay off debt is to turn the debt over into cash flow. Now, how do we do that? First off, we can reduce our debt payments. We do that through sometimes refinancing, the bundling of loans. We do that through conversion. So for example, if you have a home equity line of credit, that if you can't pay that back, you lose your house. Okay? This is very important to understand. If you have a credit card, if you can't pay that back, you'll lose the credit card. Your credit score suffers. Which kind of debt would you rather have if we're going into poor economic times? Now, collectively, the majority of the people already had horrible credit card debt, so they can't move into credit card debt as times are tough, as an emergency fund, as a bridge to better things, because they already had high credit card debt. The key is to avoid, actually, the joke I had jotted down to use in this podcast, which I'm not the best at delivering jokes, but is basically you can eliminate and avoid hundreds of millions of dollars in debt by simply not creating it in the first place. So if you're going to go into debt for something, go into debt for a business, go into debt for an asset, not a better car, but just get a car that works. When we talk about intentional thrift, if your house is too big and it takes a lot of time and effort to clean, because time and effort is just as valuable as money, then get a smaller house. Move closer to the kids. Move closer to recreational areas. Move into a community that's better managed. Move into a community with a more modern home that requires less maintenance. Don't necessarily go up in, if your current house is $500,000, you don't need to buy another $500,000 house. Now, again, we have to understand that, like, for example, if you sell a $250,000 house, you need to have someplace to live. And if all there is smaller $250,000 houses, then sometimes it's beneficial to wait until markets are better. I was talking to somebody who has basically their house is paid for, their cars are paid for, everything is paid for, and now they want to move because someone came along and told them that their house is worth significantly more than they thought it was. And so what they're seeing is instead of $250,000 at a house, they're seeing $500,000 in equity, and they want to get out, not realizing that where they want to move, you're not going to buy a $250,000 house anywhere near the lifestyle that they had before. Again, these are things that we consider. Now, what tools do we use? Well, I prefer you work with a certified financial planner who is paid a fee. Not somebody who's pumping funds, not somebody who's getting commissions, but somebody who is you pay a couple $100 to meet with them. I recommend you plan on paper rather than thinking about, worrying about, churning over the debt you have. Make a list of all the money you owe people, the phone numbers and contact information, how much the payments are, the percentage rate, and just start working that debt. We got a couple spreadsheets the folks use, but I've used just a pad and paper at times. I've had clients really gain power and control over their money by simply grabbing a pad of paper, making a list of all the people they owe money to, all the due dates, all the payment sizes, what bank account does it come out, and just the effort of making that list each month encourages them to pay that down faster, better, to be more strategic. If it's a 0% interest loan, then don't pay it down as fast as something that's a 7%, 8%, 25%. I've seen people who are accelerating payments on vehicles so that they'll have the security and comfort of knowing their vehicle's paid off while they're accumulating a higher interest someplace else. So they're basically spending $25, $30 extra dollars on the car payment while they're getting charged $30, $25, $40 extra every month on their credit card. We have to be smart about this. Now, the way you get smart about your money is you gain control, and writing things down on paper where you can see it gets you control. And one of the most exciting things, because I've been in debt more than once, that's just what happens to entrepreneurs. That's what happens when there's economic changes. That list on a pad of paper of who you owe money to, and then after you make that payment, you cross it off. Then at the end of the month, you make a new list and you tear up the old list. You will see the progress moving forward. But it is a distraction to pay off debt. Let me explain why. Debt accumulated in a good economy at low interest rates can be paid off with highly inflated dollars. Dollars that are the same value, but they have no purchasing power in the marketplace. They can pay off debt. That assets to cash flow that you purchased during the good economy or you purchased while the economy was recovering now have greater asset value. They have greater cash flow. They have greater leverage value. These are things that you can do to boost your cash flow because the cash flow itself loses value. So $100 today doesn't buy as much as you could buy even 10 years ago. However, if you have rent, if you have other ways of increasing that cash flow, you can keep up with inflation or even beat inflation, and that's how we accumulate wealth. So I know I've covered a lot of different things here today. The key things I want you to take away to understand is that you gain more control over debt by either not creating it in the first place or creating it in strategic ways that develop additional cash flow. You can only create wealth and pay off debt with cash flow, free net cash flow. And if your free net cash flow is going towards debt, it's not going towards your wealth. So how do we gain control? We use tools and systems to gain control. One such system is the Debt Management Plan, which is a coaching program that I have available at the website, www.sustainablewealthsecrets.com. But you can get started today with a pad of paper, simply making a list of your bills. One piece of paper, you make a list of your bills, put it up on a corkboard. Another piece of paper, you make a list of your debt, put it up on a corkboard. And as you pay off these bills or as you reduce this debt, you cross it off, you get a sense of accomplishment. You're now more in control than you were before. You can understand that when you're fearful or emotionally distraught about debt, you're more likely to fall for tricks and consumerism. You're more likely to buy entertainment and gadgets to make you feel better when ultimately being the master of your money feels the best. And again, My path is intentional thrift. Your path may be something completely different. But the path you take turns income into wealth. Wealth, again, is a factor of assets that cash flow so that your income is constantly increasing, your free net cash flow is growing, and those funds are now invested. Rather than expanding your lifestyle, rather than keeping up with the Joneses, rather than external visions of wealth, you have internal confidence, internal family structure. You have good relationships. You have the things that money cannot buy. Money can secure these things, and they can protect you against the downside of these things, but ultimately you have sustainable wealth. I'm Justin Hitt with Sustainable Wealth Secrets, where we help business owners and executives, high-income professionals, high-net-worth families cultivate wealth that can last for generations. Wealth of knowledge, wealth of structure, wealth of performance, wealth of monetary means. If you're interested in growing your wealth to turn your income into opportunity, visit us at www.sustainablewealthsecrets.com. Go to the contact page and ask your questions. Go to the newsletter and join our free newsletter. We have a number of coaching services, analyst services, and other tools to help you become more prosperous. I hope you avail yourself of those. But again, I'd love to hear your success stories. We get a number of success stories just from the podcast. We deliver this podcast as a public service to those who are interested, and folks who do the things that we prescribe in the podcast or engage with questions get results. And that alone builds your confidence, builds your resolve, and moves you towards wealth. Again, I want to thank you for listening. I'm Justin Hitt with Sustainable Wealth Secrets, where we help you transform your income into net worth, that net worth into wealth, and generations of it. See you in the next podcast.